Hi guys, welcome back to Eye of the Beholder, where we review the Dungeons & Dragons miniatures released by WOTC and WizKids during the 20 years between 2003 and 2023. With this video, we'll be starting a review of the Orc miniatures, and as I alluded to at the end of my last video, I have some things to say about this, so let's get started. Orcs are the bad guys. Period. Full stop. End of discussion. They are not the affable vagabonds who grind maize and dabble in falconry. They are evil. They don't leave families behind when they reluctantly go to war. They revel in it and wonder why you can't eat the hobbit's legs because they don't need legs. And even the sometimes exceptions, the half-orcs, are hit and miss at best. Because even when a half-orc turns good, and we do have half-orc paladin miniatures, think about the circumstances that resulted in said half-orc. Do you suppose it was some benevolent orc minstrel that came across the comely farmer's daughter, swept her off their feet, and they married and lived happily ever after? Or do you suppose that the encounter went somewhat differently, in a way that if I was to properly describe would definitely get my channel banned? Alright, enough of that. Let's get into the video. One programming note, I'm going to reverse things up and start with the minis created by WizKids from 2014 and 2023, then pick up the WOTC miniatures in the next video. The reason is simple. WOTC made way more orc miniatures. WOTC's 37 versus only 18 from WizKids. And since I started this video with a bit of a rant, I figured better to start with a smaller batch. Finally, we'll be reviewing by sets. So let's get started.
2014's Tyranny of Dragons gives us two orcs, a common orc fighter and an uncommon Orc orc fighter. FYI, overall, the WizKid orc miniatures are all pretty good, and these are no exceptions. The brown furred tunic lined with white over black trousers is exceptional. Love how the muscular arms are bare. We also get decent face paint. Note the lower tusks protruding from the jaw. Finally, I really like the oversized axe with the skull inlay. Score: Paint 23, Pose 16, Playability 25, Pizzazz 19, for a score of 83. Orcs, native to the Underdark, are larger and more aggressive than your standard orc, if you can believe that. This mini looks it, towering over his cousin. Of course, the absolutely massive studded mace held high above his head makes him look even taller than he is. Clad in plate mail under a brown tunic and cloak, he stares down at some poor unfortunate. That mace is gonna hurt. Finally, even better facial detailing here. Tusks. Score: Paint 18, Pose 15, Playability 13, Pizzazz 25, for a score of 71. Remember when I mentioned half-orc paladins in the intro? Well, we get one in the Rage of Demons set of 2015. Standing at parade rest with his helmet cradled under his left arm, while his great sword is grounded in his right, his plate is polished, his face is serene, love the long flowing hair, while his cloak ripples in the breeze. Usable as a PC mini or as an NPC paladin, based on the stance, perhaps the captain of a knightly order. Score: Paint 15, Pose 17, Playability 13, Pizzazz 18, for a score of 63. A year later, we get this standard orc miniature in the 2016's Monster Menagerie set. Posed in a prelude to battle, with arms outstretched and axe at the ready, wide stance, and eyes on the prize. The color palette is muted, grays for the armor and skin, with brown for the hair and cloak. Absolutely playable. As we go, you'll see what kind of a varied orc warband we can build. Score: Paint 13, Pose 14, Playability 17, Pizzazz 14, for a score of 58. We get a trio of orcs in the following year in 2017's Monster Menagerie 2 set. We get our first variant, but one with quite a bit of difference between the two. The common version, armed with a warhammer, is pretty basic, while the uncommon version, with sword, is more detailed. Note the studs on the leather skirt and the long ponytail flowing out from the silver helm. Pose has them leaning far forward. Yes, it's deliberate, no repair needed. I like the detail of the spiked gauntlet they wear on their offhand. Score: Paint 12, Pose 13, Playability 15, Pizzazz 13, for a score of 53. Our third mini is a female half-orc barbarian, complete with an invisible version for some reason. Posed in profile, she holds her two-handed warhammer at the ready, easy enough to change her grip and swing away. Dressed in a tan leather tunic and matching boots, it's a little underwhelming. I mean, I know it's a girl, but shouldn't it be bigger? Score: Paint 12, Pose 13, Playability 13, Pizzazz 10, for a score of 48. Later in 2017, we get another two variants, these from the Tomb of Annihilation set. Obviously, Pose is identical, set in profile with their weapon of choice up and ready to strike. Browns for the clothing, gray for the skin, and with prominent teeth and tusks, our differences are subtle. A bit of lighter brown on the tunic and armor for the sword-wielding version, while the Axeman's gray cowl is different from the brown of his partner. Score: Paint 13, Pose 15, Playability 18, Pizzazz 15, for a score of 61. "2018 only gives us one orc, and it's a half-orc at that. Meet Zarash the Hunter from the Waterdeep Dragon Heist set. An assassin known for his proficiency with a bow, the pose pretty much matches the book art, bow lowered but at the ready, arrow knocked. Besides the bow, he is armed for bear, with a slightly curved longsword on his back and a sheathed dagger on his chest. Colors are muted brown, matching his profession, but the silver padrones do stand out. Score: Paint 14, Pose 14, Playability 18, Pizzazz 17, for a score of 63. Not all half-orcs are the result of human-orc relations. Meet the Tanaruk, an unholy cross of orc and Tanarai demon. We get our only Tanaruk mini taking up a rare slot in the Waterdeep Dungeon of the Mad Mage set of 2019, along with an invisible version. Tanaruks are described as short and stocky, which matches the mini here as he strides forward, glaive raised in a striking position. His mottled green body is mostly on display, with only a ragged brown loincloth as covering. Finally, his demonic side is revealed in the curved horns and spiked protrusions at the elbow. Score: Paint 15, Pose 13, Playability 13, Pizzazz 14, for a score of 55. Later in 2019, we get this Orc Claw of Luthik mini in the Volos and Mordenkainen's Foes set. Luthik is the goddess of home, hearth, and healing, so her sect only has female clerics. But don't equate female with weak. Check out the well-toned physique on this girl, particularly the arms and back. Her gray skin has been painted with runes on the extremities, with a painted death face to match. I can absolutely see using one or two of these minis in a support role for any orc raiding party. Score: Paint 17, Pose 14, Playability 18, Pizzazz 17, for a score of 62. We get our second Orog miniature in 2020's Icewind Dale Rime of the Frost Maiden set. Called an Orog Ranger, I really like the facial detailing on this one, especially the tusks, and the top knot is top notch. Posed at attention with a very large battle axe at the ready, he is ready for anything. Again, brown for the cloak and tunic over gunmetal gray in the armor seems to be the standard for the Orcs here. So score is Paint 14, Pose 17, Playability 13, Pizzazz 24, for a score of 68. Although our next Orc from 2022's Mordenkainen Presents Monsters of the Multiverse set is titled simply Orc, he frankly looks more humanoid to me, or at the minimum, half orc. Dressed in typical rogue attire with black boots and trousers, along with a matching hooded cloak, he is definitely on some nefarious mission. He's even wearing a Lone Ranger mask. Really, the only hint of orcish blood is the faintly visible lower tusk protruding from his jaw. Score: Paint 15, Pose 13, Playability 13, Pizzazz 13, for a score of 54. After several years of one-offs, WizKids hits us with 4 Orc miniatures in 2023's Bigsby Presents Glory of the Giants. Leading off with a common Orc mini, clothed for colder climes, with a heavy brown fur tunic over thick white fur collar, armed with a crude hammer, which he seems to be using to point out the enemy. Score: Paint 13, Pose 11, Playability 15, Pizzazz 12, for a score of 51. The very next mini is our final Orog. Smaller and stockier than our previous Orog minis, he is posed mid-battle axe swing. Note how his tan cloak is swirling in the opposite direction. Paint palette is the same as the previous Orogs. I'll use them, I guess, but I like the other two better. Score: Paint 14, Pose 14, Playability 12, Pizzazz 13, for a score of 53. I think this third Orc is female. It is wearing the exact same tunic as the Luthic Cleric, right down to the matching black and white belt. She is unarmed but apparently undaunted, moving towards her target with arms out and black claws fully displayed. Add to the warband for variety. Score: Paint 17, Pose 12, Playability 14, Pizzazz 13, for a score of 56. Finally, one of these things is not like the others. Meet the Orc Wizard Runecaster. We capture this trim, impeccably dressed spellcaster mid-spell as a translucent blue spell effect emanates from his raised hand. I don't know what to make of this guy. Outside of the spell effect, he looks like someone you'd run into at a Starbucks. He's even wearing glasses. And the 2 hammers hanging from his belt look more utilitarian than threatening. Score: Paint 18, Pose 17, Playability 8, Pizzazz 20, for a score of 63.
And with that, we are done with the WizKids Orcs. Thanks to all who watched, particularly the ones who listened through my rant at the beginning. Would love to hear your thoughts about it. We'll go backwards next week when we review the many Orc miniatures created by WOTC. Until then, Eye of the Beholder, signing off.